Under a sky stained the color of burnt copper, Colter Hayes lived apart from the world. His cabin crouched on the high ridge like an animal too tired to prowl, wood darkened with storms, windows shuttered against the wind. The townsfolk below whispered his name the way one might whisper about an omen, Silent Mountain. They believed him made of stone, a man who had buried his voice the same day he buried his brother, Finn. The memory of that graveyard dirt, still damp from rain, never left him. It clung to his boots, his chest, the hollow in his throat where words should have lived. He walked through each day like a man already half dead, feeding the fire, cutting the wood, eating only enough to keep going. Sometimes he heard laughter on the wind from the town below, laughter that twisted into his brother's voice. He would stop, axe frozen in mid-air, waiting, hoping, until silence claimed him again. The mountain of grief stood tall, and Colter wore its weight like chains. And yet, even stone can crack. He did not know it then, but change was already climbing his hillside, soft-footed and desperate. It began on an evening when fog pooled like spilled milk in the gullies, and the sky smelled of rain. A knock came at his cabin door, hollow and hesitant. Colter stiffened, hand hovering near the rifle by the hearth. No one came to him. No one dared. The knock came again, softer this time, as if whoever stood there feared not being heard. When he opened the door, he found her. A woman wrapped in a threadbare shawl stood trembling at his threshold. Her hair was dark as raven's wings, her eyes carrying the kind of exhaustion that comes only from too many nights awake. At her side clung two little girls, no taller than the handle of his axe. They were twins, faces smudged with dust, but their eyes, bright, searching, unbroken, made Colter's throat ache in a way he had not felt in years. The woman's voice came low, soft, yet steady enough to carry through the storm. "I need shelter. Will you take us in?" Colter stared, unable to summon an answer. His mind recoiled at the weight of strangers in his silence. He thought of the gossip that would already spark in town if they knew she had come here. Worse, he thought of Finn, how he had failed to keep him safe, and how anyone who drew close was bound to be broken by his curse. Yet the girl's small hands, clasping their mother's palms, struck through him like sunlight piercing the cracks in canyon stone. He found himself stepping aside before he knew why, the door creaking wider in a gesture that felt heavier than words. They entered, carrying the scent of travel, of dust, of survival. The girls huddled near the hearth, their eyes flicking to every shadow of the room as though measuring its safety. The woman thanked him only with a nod, moving quietly as if afraid of waking some slumbering beast. Colter did not answer, only lowered himself into his chair, eyes following her every move with suspicion and something else he could not name. The fire popped. The storm pressed against the walls. His silence lay heavy, but she did not push against it. By morning, the cabin was not the same. She had swept the floor clear of ash, arranged the woodpile with neat precision, and set a small broth of roots to simmer for her daughters. The girls giggled softly, their voices like bells in the still air. Colter watched them, unsettled by the sound. His cabin had forgotten laughter, now it trembled at the intrusion. Yet, when one of the girls, Juniper, the mother called her, looked up at him with a grin missing 2 teeth, Colter's mouth betrayed him. A faint, reluctant smile tugged at his lips before he caught it. The woman saw. She did not speak of it, but her eyes softened, and something delicate settled between them, invisible but present. A seed planted where stone had long reigned. What could come of such a thing, in a house ruled by silence? Colter asked himself this, though he would never have spoken the words aloud. News traveled faster than rivers in that town. By the week's end, Pastor Silas Morrow stood in his pulpit, railing against impropriety and sin on the mountain. Sadie Finch carried the words into her saloon, spreading them with the same delight she spread whiskey. Soon the talk grew teeth. A widow, an outsider, living under the roof of Colter Hayes? It was said in tones of scandal, as if the act itself shook the moral spine of the town. Marshal Abram Holt rode up the ridge one afternoon, his coat heavy with dust, his eyes cold as steel nails. He looked at Coulter standing in his doorway, arms crossed. "This ain't proper," the lawman said. "You know what folks are sayin', da." Coulter said nothing. His silence was sharper than any argument, his jaw hard as carved stone. Holt narrowed his eyes, spat into the dirt, and turned his horse without another word. But Althea rose. He had heard her name whispered by her daughters, felt the wind shift colder that day. The weight of the town's judgment pressed against her shoulders like another burden she had no strength left to carry. That night, as the fire crackled, she sang her daughters to sleep. The language was soft, fluid, a melody shaped by her Comanche blood, words that seemed to braid sorrow and hope together. Coulter sat by the table, fists clenched, but the song worked into him like rain through dry soil. His brother's face rose in his mind, Finn calling for him in that final moment, and Coulter not there to answer. His silence cracked. "He died 'cause I wasn't there," Coulter rasped, voice breaking. "He needed me, and I wasn't there." His eyes burned, but no tears came, only the weight of years. Althea did not answer with words. She crossed the room, placed her hand upon his arm, and left it there. No demand, no judgment. Just warmth. In that touch lived something stronger than comfort. It was trust. The silence between them shifted, no longer an enemy, but a place they now shared. The days after carried a rhythm Coulter had nearly forgotten. He and Althea worked side by side, planting a small patch of earth with peppers and herbs. Their hands dug through the soil together, dirt streaking their skin. At one moment, she flicked a clump of earth at him, laughter spilling from her like a stream. Coulter froze, startled by the playfulness, then something broke loose within him. A deep laugh rolled out of his chest, loud and full, shaking the cabin's walls. The twins shrieked with delight, chasing each other through the garden. Althea watched him, her lips curving with a smile that lingered even when she looked away. The cabin no longer felt like a tomb. It breathed now. But life draws envy as much as warmth, and the town's whispers were not done. By midsummer, a crowd gathered in the square, torches burning as anger spilled from mouths too afraid of change. Pastor Morrow cried that sin must be cast out, that Coulter Hayes had defiled his mountain. It did not take much for them to climb the ridge, Marshal Holt at their head, faces set with righteousness that tasted of fear. Inside the cabin, Juniper and Lark clung to their mother. Althea's breath shook as she glanced to Coulter, who stood at the door, hand pressed against the frame as though weighing whether he was strong enough to hold back the world. His silence had been his shield, his prison, his curse. But now it asked him to choose. Remain the mountain that stood mute and alone, or speak, once and for all. The shouts rose outside, torches casting light against the logs. "Send her out! This ain't right!" The crowd surged, anger thick in the night. Coulter stepped into the doorway. His shadow stretched tall, his shoulders squared. For the first time in years, his voice roared out, deep and thunderous, rolling down the hill like the storm itself. "This is my home. This is my family. You'll not touch them." The words hung heavy, shaking the air. The mob faltered, faces blanching. Some shifted uncomfortably, others lowered their torches, shame seeping into their bones. Even Marshal Holt, cold and stern, turned his gaze aside, unable to meet the mountain's roar. One by one, they drifted back into the dark, their anger unraveling into silence. The hillside grew quiet again, only the night birds singing. Coulter stood there, chest heaving, until the last ember of torchlight vanished. He turned back inside, where Althea stood, eyes glistening not with fear now, but with something deeper. The twins rushed to his legs, clutching him, and for the first time, he let his arms fold around them. He was no longer the silent mountain, for the mountain had spoken. Days later, beneath the wide shade of a cottonwood tree, Coulter Hayes and Althea Rose were wed. It was not a grand ceremony, nor a loud one, but the town gathered, uncertain yet curious, watching as the widow and the mountain stood side by side. The twins scattered wildflower petals, their laughter weaving through the breeze. Some hearts softened, others held back, but all who saw knew something unyielding had shifted. That night, as the full moon washed silver across the cabin roof, Coulter whispered to Althea, his voice rough yet tender, "My heart beats again because of you." She rested her head upon his chest, and he wrapped her in his arms at last. Outside, the garden grew under the moonlight, roots digging deeper, leaves stretching higher. Even mountains, when touched by light long enough, can melt. And so it was with Coulter Hayes, whose silence broke not in defeat, but in love. And if you, weary traveler, ever feel your own heart locked in stone, remember this: the dawn waits at your door. All it asks is that you open it,